You had me at Camp Slasher, and then you lost me. Let's review Hell of a Summer. Hell of a Summer stars Fred Heschinger, Billy Bryk, Finn Wolfhard, and is directed by Billy Bryk and Finn Wolfhard. What's up, guys? Welcome to a brand new 2025 review, Hell of a Summer. And let me just tell you, when I saw the trailer for this movie, I was thinking, oh my God, that looks so freaking fun, because I am a big sucker for camp slashers. I always come running for camp slashers. It doesn't really take much for me to love, or at least like, a camp slasher. You know, just give me a few certain things, and and then I'm on my way, and I have a really good time with most camp slashers. Love the Friday the 13th franchise. Love the first three sleepaway camps, right? The characters, you know, these aren't Shakespeare type characters. I think one thing that you definitely have to have in a camp slasher is really great, fun kills, okay? And I'm getting ahead of myself, all right? I'm already starting to rant about this movie, and I think because it broke my heart. I wanted to see this movie so bad, and I really, really wanted to love this movie so bad. So let's back up. Let's give you a quick plot synopsis, and I will be fair, and I'll give you a couple of things that I do like about the movie, okay? But for the most part, disappointment is the word here of the day, okay? Oh, and real quick, Levi, he's been having health problems. He's 15 years old, and I wanted to just dedicate this review to him, because we love you, buddy. Levi's such a big part of this channel. He's always been a big part of this channel. And I want to honor Levi. Okay, I'm dead serious. I love you, buddy. Okay, look, he's trying to speak into the mic. What a guy. What a guy. So the plot of this movie, it's pretty basic, like any other camp slasher. You have some camp counselors that are going to this, I think it's Camp Pathways, something like that. The main character here is Jason, played by Fred Heschinger. I'm sure the name Jason was intentional. He is a little past his prime in terms of, you know, being a camp counselor. He is 24 years old. The running joke throughout this movie is, why are you here? You even said last year that this was your finale. You're not going to do this anymore. It's time to grow up. But he just can't let it go. Even like his mother drops him off at the beginning of the movie. But, and even she is telling him, I think it's time to like move on from this. And so that's part of the charm of the movie. And I do think Jason as a character is, I think, the best character and the most charming character. I think Fred Heschinger, he's a really likable guy. Okay, so it has that going for it. So then the rest of the characters who are camp counselors, they're pretty much just generic throwaway characters, and that does sound harsh. Yes, I think they all have their own certain personalities, and I don't hate these characters. When you're in a camp slasher, like I said, I think your characters, they just don't need to be so annoying, right? And I don't think all of these characters are really that annoying. I just have a big problem with how these characters are handled, and really the overall tone and intention of this movie. But like I said, starting with the good, I have to give mad kudos to Finn Wolfhard and Billy Bryk for being able to write and direct this feature. And I think as far as like, you know, camera movements and all that stuff, they do a fine job doing this. You know, I think for a very first movie, I believe this is the first movie that they've done, I can commend them. Of course, I've seen far worse movies than this. I mean, for as young as they are, and to be able to put forth a feature like this, even if it's not the best movie, I have to give them mad props, you know, to be able to handle the job of a leader, really, and of a director. And I'm sure that they probably helped each other out. I wonder if Finn Wolfhard was a little bit inspired by the Duffer Brothers for Stranger Things, which, by the way, I was in Stranger Things. I was an extra in 2 different episodes from the first and second season. I literally stood right behind Finn Wolfhard, who was probably, you know, he was a kid. He was a little kid. And he was in the craft services line, and I was right behind him. So yeah, you know, I wonder if maybe he was inspired by seeing the Duffer Brothers work together, and I'm sure he got quite a few directing ideas from them. When I worked on set there, I would watch them plan out a scene, and they would literally use their cell phone. They would plan, they would use their cell phone to kind of map out, frame whatever scene they wanted to do, and then they would translate it to the camera. And one more thing on the positive, I think there are a couple of charming scenes. This is definitely more of a comedy than it is a horror movie, although there are kills in the movie. I found myself giggling a couple of times. A couple of the jokes were fun, but to me, that was like maybe 10 minutes out of an hour and 30-minute runtime. For the most part, I was kind of just annoyed with this movie, and I think let's just go ahead and jump into the many problems that I had with this movie. But overarching, I think the big problem was the overall tone and really just, I guess, picking a lane. It's obvious that this is a horror comedy, but I do think there is a certain tone that you want for a camp slasher, right? And I think that the killer in the movie, I definitely think you need to give due credit to the actual killer. Make that killer shine in some way or another. Make that killer have some sort of personality. And I think the killer in this movie takes a back seat. I think it really does. I think there are spaced out kills here and there. And then I think we break sort of way too long in terms of like just comedy, trying to make these characters really, really funny. But logic has to kind of play a part in here too, unless we're doing a full-blown parody, which I don't think this movie is trying to do. And what I mean by that is there are certain decisions in this movie where they just automatically say, you're the killer. And I won't even spoil like who they initially point the finger at as who is the killer. But they take it even a step further and they like tie the person up and they're getting ready to like torture him, but there's just like no evidence whatsoever for them to think that this person is the killer. There's no buildup to that. There's no evidence. And it's all there just to kind of set up a joke that doesn't really land that well. And so that just sort of takes me out of the movie, because then I'm poking fun at the movie, which I should be just having fun with a camp slasher. And I think another thing that makes camp slashers work so well is you better have some damn good kills. Let me just say this right now. If this were a Friday the 13th movie, and Friday the 13th does have comedies sprinkled in throughout. I know this is a knee-jerk reaction, but this would be the worst Friday the 13th movie. The worst. The worst Friday movie is better than this movie. I'll say that. And this made me appreciate the Friday the 13th movies, because Jason Voorhees is such an iconic killer. And yes, I'm not saying that this has to have a Jason Voorhees level killer, but at least in terms of the kills, they took the time to make sure every one of those kills were just really great, that they landed. And I would say 99% of the kills in this movie are off screen. I think I counted one kill that was on screen. And also, way too many people live in this movie. And I know that might sound like a little bit of a spoiler, but when you have a movie with, I think, a sufficient amount of characters, I think it's just a lot more fun to whittle them down to one or two characters. And that just wasn't the case in this. And it didn't earn that, right? Those characters that were alive, there was no blood, sweat, and tears in the actions of those characters to warrant them surviving. And really, you didn't care about them surviving. It's so forgettable, the journey that any of these characters go on. And I think the one character that stands out the most in this movie is Jason, funny enough. And this is just a reminder too, there are very few, if any, movies with Finn Wolfhard that I like. And it's a weird thing to say, because I didn't dislike him in this movie. And I'll even say he plays this character Chris, and Billy Bryk plays this character Bobby. And they are really fun characters. It feels like you're channeling a little bit of Jimmy and Ted from Friday Part 4. But they definitely didn't have the charisma that those two characters have. And then they're playing off this little subplot of Chris really having the hots for this girl, Shannon. But that relationship and every relationship in this movie, it all feels very surface level. And again, if I could compare this to like a Friday the 13th movie, it made me appreciate that maybe those characters aren't just surface level in those movies, because for some reason, I remember them. I remember a lot of the characters in the Friday the 13th franchise, and I think most of these characters in this movie are just throwaway characters. I don't know if that's my nostalgia talking to me. Even like some of the lesser Friday movies, like Friday Part 7, which I love Friday Part 7, but you know, it's a good example as far as characters. Those characters are still very memorable, and there's a lot of them in that movie. But to be fair, I will say Bobby was a really fun character. He and Jason are the best of the characters, but the rest of the characters, you will forget about them in 2 days, okay? I promise. So, summing it up, this movie just has no personality. And I think it's just a wasted effort. I think a lot of the comedy in the movie, it just doesn't really land. I think this movie doesn't really hone in on a certain lane that it's trying to do, you know, as far as like horror and comedy. It never fully commits to either, and it never fully succeeds to either. So I got to give this movie a 2 hours loss, guys. It was just really tough to get through, and it's a shame because they had a damn good trailer for this. That trailer made me so excited to watch this movie, and then the movie itself completely disappointed. But I hope you guys like it. If you like this movie, let me know in the comments for Hell of a Summer. Also, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks, where we talk horror all day and every day. And on Fridays, we do FIFA Fridays. Follow me at Drumdums on all my socials. Support me on Patreon. Become a channel member. Buy me a coffee. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a good day, and Drumdum out.